You promised yourself you'd quit, maybe 5 times, maybe 20, or maybe even 100, and every time it follows the same pattern. You hold out for a few days, sometimes a week or two, but then something inside you clicks again and you slip back unnoticed to the place you were trying to escape. And at that moment, most people start thinking destructive thoughts about themselves. If I smoke, it means I'm weak. If I can't put my phone down, it means I have no willpower. If I overeat, it means I can't control myself. If I procrastinate, it means I'm lazy. And the more labels you put on yourself, the more helpless you begin to feel. You start to think that there's something wrong with you, that other people can do it, but you can't, that you're weaker, and that this is how it will always be. But let me tell you one important thing. You're not weak. You just haven't understood until now exactly how your brain works and why these habits took control over you. Almost every destructive habit started for a reason. At one point, it helped you cope with something inside. A cigarette provided a brief sense of relief in moments of stress. Endless scrolling created the illusion of connection with the world during moments of loneliness. Overeating at night became a way to feel warmth and calm when things felt overwhelming inside. The problem isn't the habit itself. The problem is that at some point, it became a way to numb inner pain, anxiety, emptiness, or tension. At some point, your brain came to see it as a savior. And as long as you try to break the habit without understanding what exactly it's replacing inside you, the cycle will repeat itself over and over again. A promise, an attempt, a few days of control, a breakdown, shame, disappointment, and a new promise. Another breakdown. Years go by like this, sometimes entire lifetimes. Most people think that overcoming yourself means constantly fighting, but it is precisely this endless inner war that weakens a person. Because the moment you start forcing yourself to change, a conflict arises within. One part of you truly wants to change. It wants freedom, it wants a new life. But another part still sees the old habit as a means of survival and comfort. This is exactly where inner resistance arises. The harder you try to suppress yourself, the more your brain clings to the old way of coping. A strict ban only intensifies the craving, because internal pressure always triggers a backlash. That's exactly why you might genuinely want to change, and at the same time feel as if some part of you is pulling you back. It's not a lack of character or a weakness of spirit, it's just the way the human brain works. It protects what it has long considered safe, even if that safety is slowly destroying you. The mistake is that you want to see results too quickly. Motivation and willpower create the illusion of a sudden transformation, a new life, a new version of yourself, a complete change in just a few days. And it is precisely this rush that keeps bringing you back to the starting point. Because sudden changes create too much internal resistance. Your nervous system perceives them as a threat to your usual state, and at some point, your mind simply brings you back to the familiar pattern. The habits you've repeated over the years gradually become part of your nervous system. They change you from the inside out. They change your reactions. They change your thinking. They change how you perceive stress, pleasure, loneliness, and life itself. That's exactly why promises alone aren't enough. People overestimate the power of willpower because they fail to understand one thing. Willpower is quickly depleted when a person lives in a state of constant inner war. Real change doesn't start with a sudden burst of effort and waiting for results, but with small actions that are repeated over and over again, regardless of mood, motivation, or circumstances. When changes happen gradually, the brain doesn't perceive them as a threat. Strong resistance doesn't kick in. You don't break yourself. You slowly reconfigure yourself. Calmly, consistently, without heroic promises, without emotional exhaustion, without the constant feeling that you're at war with yourself. That's exactly what works. And this raises a logical question that changes everything. Not, how can I break a bad habit? But, how can I act in a way that prevents my brain from perceiving the change as a threat while still achieving the desired result? It is precisely this question that changes the very approach to change. Imagine a typical evening. You're left alone with your thoughts, and after a while that familiar urge creeps back in. Not because you actually need it, but because your brain has gotten used to reacting this way to stress, boredom, anxiety, or an inner emptiness. Our biochemistry is designed in such a way that any habitual impulse triggers a whole chain of chemical reactions within the body. It is these reactions that create that very feeling of craving, which pushes you again and again toward the familiar action. But it's important to understand the main thing. No craving lasts forever. It has its own cycle. First, a slight sensation appears. I want. Then the internal tension begins to grow. At some point, a feeling arises that you must do something immediately, or it will only get worse. This is exactly where the automatic reaction has kicked in for years, at the peak, without awareness, without choice, following the usual script. You have to know, the peak doesn't last long, just a few minutes. And if you don't react instantly and don't act on the impulse, something important begins to happen. The nervous system gradually reduces the tension on its own. The craving starts to fade, the body calms down, and what seemed almost unbearable just a few minutes ago begins to lose its hold on you. Once the peak has passed, you are no longer acting on impulse. You regain the ability to make conscious choices, and in this state, your decisions become much clearer and more correct. It is at this very moment that true understanding comes. Craving is not a necessity. When a craving arises, don't deny yourself. Allow it, but put it off. Tell yourself, I'll do this a little later, but for the next 10 minutes, I'll just sit with this desire. Don't get distracted. Don't suppress the thought. Don't run away from it. Just observe it. Just as if you were looking at a cloud in the sky. It's there, it's moving, and at some point you'll notice. It begins to dissolve on its own. Now here's an important point. How you label that urge itself. I just feel like it. I'll just let myself relax a little. One time won't change anything, and it is precisely in this fog that it becomes strongest. But the moment the impulse arises, try doing something different. Give it a specific name. This is anxiety. This is fatigue. This is boredom. This is the urge to smoke. At that moment, an important inner shift takes place. You stop being inside the impulse and start noticing it. It's no longer I want. It becomes a desire has just arisen in me. And the difference between these two states is enormous. Because a desire, it becomes a normal physical sensation that you can wait out. Every time you feel like a pattern is repeating itself automatically without your conscious choice, pause for a moment. Mentally count to 3, not to stop yourself, but to regain control. Tell yourself, I can choose, not just repeat. Where there was a pure reaction just a moment ago, a choice appears. One such micro decision is enough to break the chain. Imagine 2 paths. One is old and well trodden. You've walked it thousands of times. That's your habit. The new one is almost imperceptible. It consists of conscious, healthy actions, a new life. And the old path always seems easier. You don't think, you just walk. But you don't need to destroy it. It's enough to simply stop walking on it. Every time a craving arises and you don't fall back into automatic behavior, you aren't fighting it. You're breaking the cycle. And then the old path begins to slowly fade away. Not right away, almost imperceptibly. And the new one, on the contrary, becomes a little more pronounced with every step. And one day you notice that everything has changed naturally. The urge no longer controls you the way it used to, and the new reaction has become your norm, not an effort. Now about replacement. If you remove an old behavior without introducing a new one, the brain creates a void, and that void is painful. It reverts to the familiar, even if it's destructive. That's why it's critically important not just to break habits, but to replace them. Instead of something sweet, a glass of water and a few calm breaths. Instead of endless scrolling, stand up, stretch, take a short walk. Instead of a cigarette, breathe in and out slowly, paying full attention to your body. Instead of your phone before bed, close your eyes and simply observe your breath. An important condition. The new ritual must be so easy that your brain doesn't resist it. Otherwise, it will quickly reject it. When the replacement is repeated over and over, the habit begins to weaken on its own. You no longer feed it, you don't fuel the impulse, but instead satisfy the real need in a different way. And gradually the neural connections begin to reorganize. And finally, the most important thing. What to do after a setback. Setbacks are almost inevitable. You'll have at least one setback, and most likely several, and that's okay. The problem isn't the slip-up itself. The problem is that people see it as the end of the road. In reality, a slip-up isn't a failure. It's a lesson. You need to accept and acknowledge it without drama. Yes, I did it. That's a fact, without self-flagellation and without thoughts like I'm a failure. Next, it's important to ask yourself the right question. Not why am I weak, but what was I feeling right before I slipped up? The answer almost always points to a specific trigger: fatigue, boredom, stress, loneliness, anxiety, disappointment. And at that moment, the key thing emerges: awareness, not as a theory, but as a foundation for the next time you slip up. Now you're not acting blindly, but with an understanding of the mechanism. You realize exactly what sets you off, where you lose control, and at what moments you're most vulnerable. Remember, recovery doesn't start on Monday. It starts the very moment you slip up.